In the previous video, I gave you help on questions that are very similar to numbers 8 and 9 on the homework, but the last two parts of this homework assignment are actually numbers 34 and 35, I believe, so I am going to be doing 33 and 36 next. Like I said, I don't like to give you the actual homework problem answers because there's only 4 questions and I want you to get practice on your own. So I'll do questions that are really similar. So if you just follow the same steps, you should be able to get it on your own. For number 33 and 36, now we are using factoring. So we're going to take out the greatest common factor. So what I like to do is I like to look at the numbers first, or the coefficients, right? The regular numbers that we are multiplying to the variables. So here we have 25 and 10. If I think to myself, what's the biggest number that goes into 25 and 10? You should be able to identify that the biggest number that goes into both is 5. And then I am going to look at the variables now. So in the variables, I have one c here and two c's here. So what's the biggest common factor here? If I have one c here and two c's here, the biggest common factor is going to be just one c. So I have 5 for the numbers and c for the variables. So once I have my greatest common factor, I am going to take 5c out from 25c and 10c squared. When I say take it out, I mean I'm going to do 25c divided by my greatest common factor, and the c's are going to cancel out, and 25 divided by 5 leaves me with 5. So I'm going to put 5 as my first term. Then for the second part, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take 10c squared, right? Because now we're done with 25c. I'm going to take 10c squared and divide it by the greatest common factor, which is 5c. One of the c's cancels out, and 10 divided by 5 is 2. So I'm left with 2c. So I add plus 2c here. But the thing is, we are not actually done with this problem yet. Because the question is asking us to solve the problem, we want our final answer to be in the form c is equal to some number. Right, so we have this equals 0 up here that I just copy and pasted down here. And we're going to use the zero product property again. So if you were able to do the first part, so numbers 8 and 9 in this homework, you should be able to do this part. So we're going to take this and set it equal to 0. And we're going to take this and set it equal to 0. So again, our final answer should look like c is equal to some number and c is equal to some number. Right, we're going to have 2 parts to our answer because there's 2 things that we are multiplying to get 0. So both of them has to equal 0. So to get this c by itself, I'm going to divide by 5, and I end up with c is equal to 0. Right, 0 divided by any number, 0 divided by 5 is c is equal to 0. And for this part, I want that c by itself. So I'm going to get rid of this 5 first. So I'm going to subtract both sides of the equal sign by 5. And then I have 2c is equal to negative 5. And I'm going to divide both sides by 2 so I can cancel out. And I get a final answer of c is equal to negative 5 over 2. So my final answer is going to be c is equal to 0 and c is equal to negative 5 over 2. And that's my complete answer. So number 34 and 35 are going to be longer like this problem. And I know number 36 looks a little different, but it is the same problem or the same format. So let's do an example of this one as well. I'm going to start off by putting all of the terms on the same side. So I'm going to have plus 28r and plus 28r. That is going to give me 0, right? This cancels out, so I'm left with 0 is equal to 4r squared plus 28r. The reason we do that is because I want this side, I want one of the sides to be equal to 0, right? That comes in handy later when we're doing the zero product property to find for the actual variable. So I just like to do that step in the beginning just to get it out of the way. You can do it later if you want, but I just like to get done with it. So once we're here, we're going to do that greatest common factor again. We're just going to see, we're going to look at the numbers. So we're going to look at 4 and 28 and try to decide what is the biggest number that goes into 4 and 28. You should be able to identify that 4 goes into 4 and 4 goes into 28. So now that we are done with the coefficients, sorry, I didn't mean to delete the numbers. Now that we are done with the coefficients, we are going to look at the variables. Right, so this first term has a variable of r squared, so there's 2 r's. And this second term has a variable of just r, so there's 1 r. So we have to think to ourselves, what is the biggest variable that goes into both r times r and r? So if I give you a second, you'll probably be able to identify that it's actually just going to be the 1r by itself. So now we have to do our division and take away or take out 4 times r from both of these. So I'm going to do 4 times r squared divided by 4r, right? Because this is our greatest common factor. So that's where we got this number from. I don't want you to think I'm pulling random numbers. I want you to realize we found this greatest common factor for a reason, and this is when we use it. So this is going to give me the r's cancel out, the 4's cancel out, so just r is the only thing that's left. And then I am going to have my 28r divided by the greatest common factor again, and it's going to be 4r. So my r's are going to cancel out, and 28 divided by 4 is going to be 7. So if you have 28 divided by 4, you're just going to be left with 7. So let me make sure. Yeah. So I have plus 7 here. And I'm doing it in red so you can see where I'm getting these numbers. Hopefully the color coding is helping you, because I don't want there to be just a bunch of arrows everywhere. So yeah, so now we have 4r times r plus 7. And if you remember, we have an equals 0 here, right? An equals 0 right here. So we can set this whole thing equal to 0. You can put on the left side if you want, because it was on the left side up here. Or you can put on the right side. Doesn't really matter. But just to make it easier for you, I'll keep it on the same side. And we are using our zero product property again. So we are going to set this side equal to 0 and this side equal to 0. So we have 4 times r is equal to 0 and r plus 7 is equal to 0. So we're going to divide both sides by 4 and we get a final answer of r is equal to 0 divided by 4, which is 0. And here we get r plus 7 is equal to 0. So I'm going to get rid of that 7 by subtracting it from both sides. And I get r is equal to -7. And now this makes sense, right? We had 2 terms or 2 groups that we were multiplying together to get 0. So it makes sense that we have two separate final answers.